Welcome everybody to the Flaminpit Show, and we're in the pit today. I'm doing a call-in from our friend Robert Stewart, Wastewater Bob. We're doing part 2 today because we had so much stuff for him to tell us that we just couldn't do it all in one show. So welcome, Bob. I know you're on the other end of this line.
Yes. Hello.
How you doing?
Hello, Flint.
How you doing down there? So, Bob, can you just tell everybody, like, briefly what it is you do, what's your title, and that kind of stuff before we jump into our topics?
Oh, my gosh, you're going to give away my age.
You just a spring chicken. Quit playing.
I know it. How did this happen, for Pete's sake? Creepers. No, I've been in the water since 1978 when the EPA promulgated the Clean Water Act. A lot of the industry was just dumping stuff into the rivers, and the drinking water was going downhill. So they demanded that the industries start to waste treat their discharges. And so I was selling chemicals at the time and slowly shifted to selling treatment plants and ended up buying, did very well at all of that, and ended up buying a water retail store. I always wanted to sell water myself, so we had a state certified lab and vended water and had a licensed bottling plant. And we moved to Flint in the mid-90s, actually the early, kind of 1994, and we bought a building and continued till just a few years ago with a licensed bottling plant and a state certified lab, and we made membrane systems there, and then I retired, and here I am. And
the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
So now, last time we talked, I think we ended at the TTHMs and different things like that, because I think still a lot of people are confused about how harmful those are. And when we talked last, and you gave me we was talking about something you could do to help with the Legionella in your shower head, is to run the cold water before and after your shower. Now, can you explain to people why you told me that?
It seems weird we're talking about how to take a shower.
I know.
I know. But being, we should be concerned, and even in the future be concerned. I'll get into that a little bit later, but the bacteria will harbor in the shower head because there's enough water retained in there, and typically your shower's warm water, and those bacteria love 98.6 to, like 104 fever temperature, and they will continue, and you'll end up with literally hundreds of thousands of colonies in that shower head. So it's a good idea after you get out of the shower is to run a little cold water, no hot water, just run the cold water through it and let the chlorine, water with chlorine, fill up that shower head. And then, like same, when you, before you hop in the shower, turn the cold water on and flush that shower head out, and that'll help you tremendously. A lot of guys get in there and they'll gargle. They'll get in the shower and turn it on and gargle. That's the worst thing in the world you can do.
I know. Don't gargle in the shower.
Yeah.
Well, when I think of shower, with all the stuff in there, you think about when you wash your hair and the water is pounding down on your face and around your eyes and everything like that. That would be not a good thing unless you run the water before and after. But who thinks about doing that? It's like get in the shower, wash your hair and everything, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And now
the difference between your shower water and your toilet water?
Probably nothing.
I'll tell you. Here it is. 1 and 2.
Oh, that's cold-blooded. Now it makes me not want to get in the shower. I might as well. So you're saying basically the water. Yeah.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Yeah, your mother always told you to put the toilet lid down.
Yeah.
when you're done. Well, that's because that was very sensible. Because when you flush it, those little bubbles come up and they pop,
Mm-hmm.
and then that bacteria that's in there gets around in the air. And there's two places you got to really watch, and don't ever drink water out of your bathroom tap, because those little bacteria will get into that faucet head, and for the same reason they'll start to grow in there, and that's your E. coli.
Oh.
And that'll give you an intestinal problem. And then the same thing we're talking about in the shower head.
Yeah, I never drink anything at the bathroom. I mean, to me, that's like a gross place to drink. I don't drink out of tap anyways, but the bathroom would be the least place that I'd want somebody to bring me some water. And I see a lot of people do that. They'd be like, oh, drink some water. And they get it out the bathroom faucet. And I'm like, no, I don't know where all that water came from.
Well, your listeners, every time they go in the bathroom now, they're going to be thinking 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
The quality of the water.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
you know what healthy water is?
No, what is it?
They call it well water.
Uh-huh.
That's a joke.
Well, yeah.
Water.
Well,
To get well.
because some
Right,
people,
so-
I don't think well water, on the top of that, I don't think well water is always something that is the greatest, considering lately I've been hearing about arsenic and stuff like that being found in wells.
Mm-hmm.
So when people...
But at least you have autonomy. It's your well,
Mm-hmm.
and you are responsible for it. Now, the leap over to government-supplied water, called municipal water,
Yeah.
is we kind of put out the hands like the advertisement for insurance, and you're in good hands with the government. Well, we've learned that we aren't.
Yeah,
So
we're not.
I think we have to have the mentality of thinking like this is well water, and yeah, the earth moves over the groundwater once a day. So we say the groundwater moves, but actually the earth moves over the groundwater. So it can change from period to period, maybe year to year. So you should get it analyzed. But we don't think of that with municipal water. We just think that somebody else is taking care of it. Well, no, we have to be responsible for what we put in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets us down to this Legionella Listeria thing.
Yeah.
And the changing of all the pipes that are going on in Flint, and the pipe that's being built from, the KWA.
Yeah, out by Lapeer.
Yeah. Now, Legionella and Listeria come in the drinking water. They are bacteria, and they are called anaerobes as compared to an aerobe. An aerobe would be the type of bacteria that's out in the clean water that's out in Lake Erie and Lake Superior, Lake Michigan. You get a lot of air. You have a lot of surface air there. You got the waves and it bubbles. And so the bacteria that live predominantly are aerobic, and they're kind of like we call the friendly bacteria because the water doesn't stink.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So Legionella and Listeria are similar. They cause pneumonia type of things, and you can die from them.
Mm-hmm.
They are anaerobes. So they live without or in the absence of oxygen. So you're going to learn this first on your station right now.
Okay.
A major concern that Bob Stewart has. The pipe, and I put this out like they've never done the pro forma study. You take the water from the Great Lakes and you put it in a pipe, and it's closed. There's no light. There's no UV light, no sterilization going on there, and there's no oxygen. And within a matter of 20 seconds to 2 minutes, all the aerobes they're dead because of lack of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
But Legionella and Listeria thrive because they don't need oxygen. They'd prefer it without oxygen. And so here you have the perfect incubator for certain bacterial forms. And these are two that we hear about in our community. So what I'm saying is the KWA lacking the pro forma study to get the bacteria counts when it hits Lapeer, and lacking the protocol to remove those. even lacking the equipment and the instrumentation or even the thinking process of analyzing for them, they are not as susceptible to be killed with chlorination as are the aerobes. So chlorination, and that's why they've gone through the Flint drinking water system, they tend to pass right on through. So we could predict a continuation. In other words, just by switching over to the KWA, we have this thinking that, you know, it's another municipality and it's going to be just fine. Well, what I'm saying is no. They haven't run the pro forma study. They're not aware. Nobody's thinking. I just don't get it. But it's mind-boggling to me. But this is not going to solve the problem with Legionnaires and Listeria coming into the Flint water supply. So people have to be aware that, and this is not just Flint. This is all over. But usually the treatment process is put close to the source. Like the Detroit system over in Port Huron is just a few hundred yards off of the water supply, the Great Lakes, and then they treat it and then they pump it. So your likelihood of having Listeria and Legionella is greatly reduced. Whereas the KWA, they have a market for raw water, not in the best interest of the drinking public in the city of Flint. So they want that raw water to come for irrigation and fracking, possibly, but particularly irrigation, because the chlorine kills the bacteria and the fungus that live in the soil. So if you continue to water with chlorine, you don't get good crops. So raw water is in demand. But it's not in the best interest of the city of Flint as far as the drinking water source.
So they actually want raw water. They really don't want the water treated. That's why nobody has done anything about it. They rather have raw water because it makes a lot of money versus giving us clean water and saving our lives.
Does not make a lot of money for the city of Flint.
Mm-hmm.
The KWA is a privately held utility. That means it's private, it's held, and it's a utility. So private means I'm not privy to being part of that privacy. I don't own stock in it. I'm not an investor, and neither is the city of Flint is joining in as a member. They have to pay to buy water from them, is the way I kind of look at it.
Yeah, that's what someone else said, that we used to sell water, but now we're buying water.
Yeah.
And that makes our water bills high.
And we have to pay, and we're paying a privilege. It's sort of like joining a golf course. You know, you got to buy an interest, in, the stock or whatever it is, or a tennis club, and then there's due so much a month. And to purchase water from the privately held utility, we have to put some money up front and then buy the water.
Now, when before all this happened, we weren't buying water, or what was happening with the water that was good, and everybody was fussing about. I mean, I don't understand what caused them to change things over, other than saying, well, we can save $4 million. Everything was fine as far as we know. People weren't dropping dead and getting sick and black and itchy and, all this kind of stuff. So I don't understand what happened to make a person would think that this is all going to be better. It's going to save us $4 million. But then we have a plant that can't handle what needs to be done.
Yeah, and the new plant, it's my belief, lacking the studies starting in 2012 that were never done, that how could they build a system without knowing what they're going to be hit with, at the end of that pipe.
Yeah.
So my confidence level is much, much lower than Jeff Wright's, the Genesee County Drain Commissioner, who is, I guess, he's the president and CEO of the privately held utility.
Yeah, the KW.
And he is also the elected official called the Genesee County Drain Commissioner, the highest paid public official in the county.
So what?
Puts his hands up now and says, I have no jurisdiction in Flint But somehow this train came running over and steamrolled Flint, and they got the short end of the stick. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and his name is attached to it. So what exactly does a drain commissioner supposed to do? Didn't he know?
Well, they are responsible. The drain commissioner, Jeff Wright, Genesee County Drain Commissioner, is responsible for your drinking water, your wastewater, and your water runoff. The water runoff would be the floods.
Mm-hmm.
The wastewater is when you flush the toilet, and the drinking water, of course, is what he's came out since 2012. And his idea in his sales pitch was millions of dollars. We're going to save millions. And he put his arms around the thing, and everybody say, "Oh my God, Detroit's way expensive, and we're having these price increases and blah blah blah." The truth of the matter is, the Flint Journal played into this story too, because when Detroit raised their prices 2% or 5%, they were charging us $12 a thousand cubic feet. Well, 5% of $12 is what, like 50 cents per thousand cubic feet. So you see, but the Flint Journal said, "Oh my God, they're raising it 5%," you know. And all of a sudden, Flint says, "Yay!" So Flint raised their already high rate 5%. So 5% of $100 is $5. See, there's a tenfold difference.
Yeah.
In laundering of the fact, and the people never got the fact that basically the water from Detroit is for free. Right now, they have a 2-year deal where the water is very cheap. It's I don't know exactly what it is because I haven't seen a bill, but it's about $10 a thousand cubic feet. We were paying $14.32, I think, at the end of 2014 when we switched over. That's free water. It's pumped to our door. It's all treated. We have to do absolutely nothing to it. We have $0 in cost except for $14 a thousand cubic feet. Now, the average homeowner uses about 7,000 or about 200 gallons a day. That's about half of that 7,000 cubic feet. So half of $8 would be $4 a month. That was the actual cost that Flint incurred to purchase that water from Detroit. Now, there's no way that the Carigandi can produce water at $4 per month per household. Impossible. We have to pay the mortgage at 4% on $350 million. That eats it up. They have to treat it. They have to pump a huge amount of electricity to pump tons and tons, millions of tons of water uphill a couple hundred feet for 60 miles, and then distribute it out, to Flint. It's impossible. But yet he was a successful salesperson by putting his arms around this and explaining it in such a way that I guess he snowballed everybody.
Yeah, he sold that just like a used car salesman, because now we're all getting the worst end of it. I mean, does he live in Flint? Does he have Flint water? I mean, what's going on with that?
No, he does not live in Flint.
Well, I thought you're supposed to live in Flint, or if you work for the city, but he works for the county though, right?
Well, he's Genesee County. Of course, Flint is the main city in Genesee County, but he does not have to live in Flint, no.
See, now that's what's not right, is so many people that don't live here that have their hand in doing stuff like that, and they're just reaping the benefits monetarily, because we're not getting any benefits. Our water bill is still high, and we still can't use everything.
Yeah.
And so
it has to be taken a look at, and the situation is now a little different econometrics because the GM has moved out. So what we have to do first is get our arms around a solid position in water so that we have a lot of water. And then what we have to do, as I mentioned on your show, and I've quite frankly, Art Woodson and I have had discussions about this, is to sell water futures. Now, a water future is water today, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to communities that don't have water but have an industrial component that need water for making parts, and we sell them a water future, which is a warranty, a guarantee, maybe $2 million, maybe $20 million up front to the city of Flint to make way for their land and acquisition and the amount of water that they need to process their parts and the water quality. So we need somebody that understands what their needs are in water quality, and we're best to put that plant and what kind of water that we have. And we have, if we can get a good position, we have access to the Detroit water, we have access to the Stewart water treatment plant on Stewart Street, and we have access to the KWA. So in the end, the first order of business should be to solidify our position with more water than anybody else in the entire United States has.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're able to just pull that off, we can put Flint back on the map as a major desirable place to move your businesses to.
Well, you know, the Lear Corporation is coming to town, and I don't know what they do. All I think about are Lear jets. So I don't know if they're making parts that need to be
automotive seating. Yeah.
Oh, so they don't need to be dunked in water or anything.
Oh, it's almost no matter what you make, you need water. So I'm sure they have some molding machines, and those molding machines use water to cool the dies between cycles.
Yeah.
It cuts the cycles times way, way down. It's called non-contact water.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do any painting or coatings, they would be phosphating and rinsing parts and then painting parts, the frames and everything that are used to make up the seat. So yeah, it's just about anybody that makes anything uses water. You know, even a dentist uses water.
Yeah, they shoot it in your face, make it look like you're taking a shower.
Yeah, I had my brother over the other day for dinner, and he says, "Bob, are these dishes clean?" And I says, "Well, they're as clean water can make them." And so he gets his dessert plate, and he says, "Bob," he says, "Are you sure this is clean?" And I says, "Yeah, Dave, that's as good as clean water can get them." So we're ready to leave, and I go open up the door, and the dog's in the way, and I says, "Clean water, get out of here, go on."
That's too funny. You a mess. Oh my goodness, that's too funny. So now, one of the things on the list, you know, we had you had stagnant water in the pipelines. Now, talk about that.
Well, that's where this Legionella and Listeria thrive, because there's no oxygen, so they can live there, and they'll eat stuff that are around. They'll eat the biofilm off the pipes. They have no problem getting food. They respirate on metals and change the oxygen state of the metal, producing the electron that they need to live. And then when the water might surge or something, you'll get a huge count of the bacteria, and that's when you get sick. Most water has some bacteria count of Legionella and Listeria. It's not unusual anywhere to have a few of these show up every now and again, but you don't have them show up by the hundreds. And when you drink a glass of water that's got 100 of those bacteria-forming colonies in there, yeah, your body just can't handle it.
Yeah.
It gets back to that thing I talked about before. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you got this ball that's maybe as big as a basketball.
Yeah.
And as the day goes on, you whack off a little bit, you know. And that's what happens with the water issue and the bacteria issue, anything you put in your body issue, is it just whacks off a little bit of that ball, and by 5 o'clock, you don't have anything left. And that's when the diseases can come in, you know, because you don't have as much energy to fight them off.
Yeah,
and that's why immunocompromised people have a problem, because that ball, they don't wake up with a basketball, they wake up with a golf ball. And by the time the day's half over, they've gotten bit because they're immunocompromised and something else kills them.
Well, that's why, when people say bottled water is no better than the tap water, that's confusing because I drink Dasani and then the other water, the other brands of water I use for everything else. So, what's the difference in the bottled water? I mean, I don't drink out of taps. I've never drank out of taps. When I was a kid on the
Yeah,
farm, when I lived on the farm, you could drink out the water hose and you was good to go. But
yeah,
ever since I've been an adult, I just don't drink tap water. And when I was
yeah.
living down south, we had good tap water and it was good. But when I moved up north, it was like the tap water was just like off. I never could get my taste buds right, so I've always drank bottled water. So what's
Hmm.
the difference in the bottled water? Is there a difference between like the name brand, Coke makes Dasani, Pepsi makes Aquafina, and then you got all these other brands?
Hmm. Well, EPA regulates the municipal water, and about 73%, the last number I saw, of the residents in the United States are on septic systems, which means they're on well water. So again, well water would be the healthy water, makes you well, because you have autonomy and you can control it. The rest of the country lives in cities, so they have municipal waters, and so that gets us to the tap water in the city versus the bottled water that you'd buy off the shelf. So the city water is regulated by EPA, and they have their standards. We talked about this before. You get the water quality report from the city of Flint, and there's one page that actually has some analysis, and there's about 15 items on there. And some of those are used in water treatment that they don't list because they use them, so they're going to be in there. But there's 15 items out of hundreds of thousands of different chemicals, but they're only obligated under EPA to check for 15 of them. Well,
So,
bottled water is regulated by Pure Food and Drug, FDA,
mm-hmm.
versus EPA.
EPA,
Now,
uh-huh.
FDA standards are much less. They're about a third. So lead, for instance, EPA is 15. Lead, FDA is 5. So you can still have 4 parts of lead in there. That's a heck of a lot better than 14.
Yeah.
Um, you know, or even 100, like municipal, can spit out. But by the time it gets to the tap,
It's
so
thousands.
the standards are less. Typically, bottled water is a private enterprise, so they're probably more efficient and other things. But the bad part about it we hear about is the leachates that are coming out of the plastic bottle itself.
Yeah, it's like they
And
were talking about the water that's sitting out in the hot sun at the little pods. They had a thing on the news about is the water good for you because I heard you're not supposed to freeze the bottles and then you're not supposed to have them out in the sun. And it's like, okay, so they said there's a number on the bottles to say that they're okay, but I never found any numbers on my bottles, so I don't know, but I don't drink the generic brands anyways. I use them for
yeah,
everything
no,
else.
the numbers are going to be the lot number of the day it was produced, the day it was bottled, actually, and they should have an expiration date on there, which is just throwing a dart at something.
Yeah, they
Uh,
told us good
as
for a
far as
year.
freezing, as far as freezing the water in the bottle, that's hokey pokey. There's no change in the chemistry of the bottle and no additional leaching of anything into the bottle. The freezing of the water in the bottle is just a wives' tale. However, on the other end of the scale, the warming as you get the body temperature of the water, if there's any bacteria that are there, they can grow because there's still a certain amount of nutrient in the water.
Mm-hmm.
The ultraviolet light that beams down on the bottle is an oxidation problem. You can do this with a milk bottle, and you'll actually pour the water out and smell polyethylene oxide. The polyethylene oxidizes right at the water-air interface, forming basically dissolved bottle in the water.
Yeah.
Now, with those little bottles that you buy or that are being distributed, actually you look at the surface area of bottle to the volume of water, and that's one of the issues as compared to a 5-gallon jug, which would be polybutyrate, which gets us into the monomers and the polymers. When they mold those bottles, they may start out with a monomer, which means one. So it's like one molecule of plastic.
Right.
And for them to hold hands and form an integral piece of plastic instead of a powder, they put these accelerating agents in there, which catalyze the ends of those molecules to hold hands and polymerize. Now, there's always an excess of catalyzers that are put in there because you have to have intimate contact. So if they put in stoichiometrically exactly the amount of catalyst, the bottle wouldn't hold water. You know, it'd crack, and it'd be cracked before it come out of the mold. So there's always an excess. Now, the UV light puts those into solution. So you definitely want to keep them in the dark. You want to keep them chilled. You don't want to have mice running around them. For some reason, these bottles of water collect mice. The mice will run around, and you know they do 1 and 2. And that's not good either.
Well, they'll bite into them because the new bottles are so thin. They can bite right through them, and then that cause everything gets to leaking everywhere.
Yeah. Well, plus they do number one, and that's really toxic. Mouse urine, the fungus that starts to grow is really toxic to us. So if you grab the bottle and then you hand the mouth, you can get sick that way too.
Oh man!
So those little bottles, that was PR as far as what I can see.
They're just.
There's been answers. There's been answers out there to resolve the issue immediately, and the government did not respond to those resolves. They went with what was secure, I guess, for lack of lawsuits and everything or whatever. And they did what they did. And they told me until they hear a better plan, they're going to stay doing what they're doing. Well, there's been better plans, but they didn't respond to them. So they didn't even respond to them.
No, they're not. Probably cost.
In other words, they never gave a phone call back or wrote a letter or at a meeting, nothing.
Yeah, they probably thought it cost too much because growing up, I drank out of glass bottles. And then when things switched over to plastic bottles, I hate it. I don't like drinking pop out of plastic bottles. I don't like drinking anything out of plastic bottles. And then with Dasani, when it first come out, the bottles were nice and thick. Now they're so thin, when you pick it up, it's like I can crush it right in my hand without even trying. You have to be real gentle when you untop it because water shoots out, from holding it. So I just wonder if the whole thing is about cost because they're making stuff chintzier and chintzier.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. How much raw oil, the oil that comes out of the ground before you get a lot of good stuff out of it, how much raw oil does it take to get that little bottle of water made?
I don't know because I didn't know it came from oil.
Yeah, it comes from oil. So the bottle does.
Oh.
It's half full with petroleum to get that. So in other words, if you got a 12-ounce bottle of water, 6 ounces it takes 6 ounces of petroleum to make that.
Now you make
Does that make any sense?
Now you making me have bad taste in my mouth because I'm thinking I'm gonna drink off this bottle and all I can think about is oil.
yeah, that's how much oil it takes to make that bottle of water.
Gross.
So,
that sounds so gross.
Now it's certainly not green. It's the farthest thing in the world from being green.
Well, is it true that I remember there was a girl that did a video when they first started testing for lead, and this girl had several different brands of water, and she had her tester, and she stuck it in each bottle, and each bottle showed so much lead. Now, on the label, it tells you that, you've got certain chemicals in there to keep the water drinkable or whatever the chemicals do. I just figure a lot of the stuff that's in there, keeps the water from turning like algae or something. I mean, what's the purpose of having chemicals in water when you want to have clean water? When you're drinking a bottled water and you're thinking, oh, this is clean water. Is it really clean? What are the chemicals for?
They put the chemicals in there for taste.
Mm-hmm. So what would it? I wonder
water,
what would it taste like without the chemicals? I mean, each bottle of water I taste it tastes different. I guess just because my tongue says Coca-Cola brand.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. The real taste from water really comes from the dissolved gases. But just like a bottle of pop, when it's warm and you pop the top,
yeah, it's fizzy. It's
all
fizzy.
that gas comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So the gases are inversely soluble at temperature. So with a bottle of water, it inevitably sees higher temperature than what you'd like it to see, and all the gases would blow out, making the water flat. So they add those chemicals. Under those conditions, most of these people walk around with a bottle and they're drinking the water tepid, room temperature or higher.
Yeah.
And the water tastes flat. So they add those chemicals to boost up the flavor a little bit. That's the sole function of those.
Well, I don't drink mine at room temperature anyways. It has to be cold.
Yeah.
I don't.
So look for the bottle of water that's got nothing in it except water, and keep it cold. And that's the best deal.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand the whole thing. And with what's going on here, it's just like when they said the crisis is over. I'm like, well, it's not over yet. I still can't just do what I want to do. Why can't I cook with my water? And when you have the TTHMs, I mean, they were telling you when they first come out, they were like, don't boil the water because of steam. And it's like, okay, you do dishes. They said, well, don't do dishes. Don't leave your dishes sitting in the water too long if they're porous, like certain chinas and stuff like that, because what does it do to the dishes? And, So.
Yeah, there's the trihalomethanes, of course, get in the air, just like the pop bottle experiment. They're volatile, they're VOC, so they get into the air, and then you breathe them, and you get cancer.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's here, everybody in Flint probably has been contaminated. So there's no way around it to say, I don't believe there's one person here that hasn't been contaminated with the water some kind of way. Now,
a lot of times you get these. Yeah, go ahead.
You have TSS versus TDS. What is that?
Oh, total suspended solids versus total dissolved solids. Okay, a suspended solid would be a particle of lead. It could be plumbous sulfate or plumbous chloride, lead chloride, in other words. And that's a particle. So a particle can be filtered.
Yeah.
The filter has to be tighter than what the particle size is of that particular particle. And particles range from like milk, which is a colloid. So those particles are 10 to 1,000 angstroms in diameter. And you go from a colloid up into these suspended particles that are very, very tiny, and depending on the temperature of the water, the water molecules bang into it and they keep it in suspension. So those particles can be filtered through what we call filters.
The ones that they give us.
Dissolved solid. Yeah, a dissolved solid is a molecule of a particle. It's very small. It's so small that it fits between the water molecules. And it gets banged around by the water molecules and keeps it between all the water molecules. And the reason why you can't see it doesn't turn cloudy or brown or yellow like what we see in Flint water. Yeah. But it's dissolved. You can't see it because it's between the water molecules. So it's impossible to filter. Yeah. You can't filter a total dissolved solids, but you can filter a total suspended solid. So the little filters cannot filter lead that's dissolved. Yeah. And a certain amount of this lead that's in the pipes and in your solder joints and in the pumps and it comes out of the waste plant and whatever out of the rivers, it's most likely dissolved.
So
depending on the corrosivity, the Langley index, the pH of the water. For instance, lead compounds are more soluble at low pH. Well, Flint water is about 6.8, so it's a little bit acidic. And so lead is more soluble. A certain amount of that lead is dissolved, and it's fitting between the water molecules. So it's very difficult to remove as compared to using a so-called filter on a particle.
So the
So
people...
they were only concerned about the particles. They weren't concerned about what's dissolved.
So, but does anybody, you know, with the filters, has anybody actually filtered any lead and they were able to see it, or was it all the dissolved soluble and they were reading the numbers from that? Because I tell people, it's like you can't filter what's soluble. It's like just running water through there, and if it's like people was getting little black chips and granulars and stuff like that when this whole thing first came out, I'm like, that you can catch in a filter, but the other stuff you can't catch.
Now you're getting into the protocol of sampling. If you pull a water specimen like Dr. Edwards did all around the city, and you have total suspended solids or particulate solid, you draw the specimen in this bottle and ship it to the lab, and it settles out, and then you analyze it. You're not getting the true reading, right? Mm-hmm. Now, he'll say, well, we use stabilized bottles with a little bit of nitric acid in it, and that's protocol, that's required. But there's not enough, and lead nitrate isn't really soluble anyways, so there isn't enough acid in there to dissolve a particle of lead. So some of those readings would have been a lot higher. It has to go through a digestion process. They call it a digestion, and that's where you dissolve everything that's in the specimen. You might use 2 acids and cook it 3 different times and filter it, and then analyze all the filters and all the supernatant, and then you can get the true test. Well, those tests weren't run. That wasn't part of his protocol. So he's in all of these tests, these government tests. They're pulling the specimen and not possibly in a lot of these homes not catching what residents are truly getting. But their theory with the government is, of course, they got that little filter on there so it catches a particle. But not so, because the particle has to be really big to be caught in one of those little carbon filters. I don't know if you've ever dissected one of those, but that's just like granular carbon in there that's been compressed. And there's a whole lot of open pathways for stuff to get through there, as compared to another type of a carbon filter that's actually fired. So they take the carbon frit and they actually fire it in the furnace, and these things just are, you can't dig a nail into it, or it's solid, and it does, the granulars don't move around. That's a lot better filter than. So those kind of gets us into,
those kind of filters, the one like you showed me is the one that is the kind that you're talking about, but those are not the kind that we were given. The Brita, the Pure, those are the ones that doesn't catch anything, and they have people believing that it's safe if you use this filter, but they're not telling the backside of it. Like what you just said, a lot of stuff is not soluble, or if it is soluble, you're not going to catch it. And nobody's catching little particles and none of that stuff. So when they actually come in and test for lead, the lead numbers are going to be wrong, basically.
Sampling is difficult. Yeah, you have to really start out with a paragraph in your sampling protocol and define what the purpose of this is. And if the purpose is to assess to EPA standard, that's one thing. But if the first paragraph in there says the purpose is to assess the human impact of the analysis or the lead content, then that's a different kind of you might actually go through the digestion process and everything. So I haven't seen his first paragraph, if he even wrote this out like that, if they have a written protocol of sampling, and the purpose of doing that would have to be written in the first paragraph. And then the last paragraph, of course, is conclusions. So there's 2 different sides to this piece of paper, because one is to test the EPA standard, which seems to be what everybody wants and what he's paid for.
Yeah.
And my God, the guy got $400,000, you know.
At least, because they got that award money too, him and the nurse, or the doctor. Yeah. And it's like, why didn't we get any of that?
Bob Stewart's first paragraph would have been different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not going to pay me $400,000 to do that. You know.
They were like, get out of here, Wastewater Bob.
Yeah.
Get out of here. But, I don't understand. Where would you get a report to see what his first paragraph is? Is that something that is like...
Have to subpoena it, I guess. I don't know. It should be available because we paid that university to get it.
Oh,
somebody ought to be able to get it.
So would they have to do a FOIA?
Even if one was ever written up.
Yeah. So I mean, when he was brought in, and knowing that, I mean, does he know the same thing you know, or you know more of the chemical side? I mean, how do you guys compare in what you know about this? Because he didn't do the kind of stuff that you would have done.
A consultant is hired at the bequest of the person that hires him, and he is supposed to support the premise of the person that hired him. That really kind of defines a consultant. So
he's just a consultant?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so they just paid him to come in, and somebody ran the test with him overseeing that, and it's like whatever they said, he agreed with it, or he was saying, well, it's not quite ready yet, the water's not good yet, let's run some more tests, and they agree with that, and then they come back, and now he's saying the water is fine according to so-and-so standards.
Now you're getting into it, according to the EPA standards. So
yeah.
It's obvious if that's his conclusion, it's obvious what his first paragraph says. Because his conclusion was it meets EPA standards.
Yeah. That's what he said.
And in the method of analysis that the EPA calls out in their sampling protocol, they don't call for digestion necessarily. Nobody, did anybody give it that extra little twist of thought to get into TSS and TDS?
Yeah.
And digest the specimen, to digest all the specimens. Well, that's a very time-consuming thing to do all those digestions.
But isn't that what he was supposed to be paid to do, though? It wasn't he supposed to come in here and pick it apart with a fine-tooth comb? I would have thought.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's why I say nothing has been done in the best interest of the residents of Flint, Michigan.
And we know that by people.
We could talk about a different topic, and I'd end up with the same conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. They haven't helped us. I mean, money has come in and people have come in, but we still got the same results. We still have the bad water. We still paying the high bill. But the people are walking away with big bucks. I mean, how are you going to come in here and get $400,000 when I can't even get money to replace my water heater? Yeah. They're responsible up to your meter and that beyond that. Yeah, that means that I have to foot the bill for that, and they should have some money allocated out of all those millions that came in to replace residents' appliances. That's what I want to know. Why isn't there anything like that? They cannot say that the water has not affected our appliances, because your washer, your dishwasher, your ice maker, your water heater, your plumbing. I don't know how corroded my plumbing is. I could go home and spring a leak and flood my whole house out. Who's going to pay for that? That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. So the other thing, another thing you have on here is radon, and I see over the last couple of years they've really been focusing on getting homes tested for radon. Right. Well, radon, actually uranium was discovered just north of the Sioux in Canada. It's about 40 miles north of the Canadian Sioux. So we are a radon state, and if you put water in a pipe and run it under the ground for any length of time, it tends to pick the radium up that's being emitted from deeper in the earth up in, and it does get into the drinking water. Now, that's great. Yeah. Another thing.
Yeah, okay, we're into radioisotopic compounds now. So there's another one. But anyways, let's go on. The radium can be removed. We do have the process to economically remove that in the homes. It's difficult to analyze because if you pull a specimen and take it to a lab, it emits itself out of the specimen by the time it gets there, so it's always a lower reading. So to do it, and it's difficult to bring the equipment into the home because it's so sensitive that you bump this stuff and you have to recalibrate it. And but there's another compound called tritium, which is I'm a little bit concerned about. Now, tritium comes in from cosmic rays, and our atmosphere. It's been coming in that way since the beginning of time. It comes into our atmosphere, and it rains, and then it gets into the groundwater. And typically, the tritium levels are really low. However, it's also formed from atomic bombs. So North Korea has been blowing off hydrogen bombs. Well, tritium is hydrogen is H2, tritium is H3, and it's radioactive.
Yeah.
Got a proton, 2 neutrons, and it's been going up. And right now, it varies, but we're at about half of the EPA standard for tritium. But they don't know what the standard is because it's been one of these elusive things. But all we do know is with all the atomic nuclear reactors, and in particular the atomic bomb testing that's been going on, whether it's below ground or above ground, doesn't matter. It ends up being picked up in our drinking water. We're getting more and more tritium in our drinking water.
So does anybody test for that, or does nobody know anything about that? Because I never heard anybody say that word before.
You heard it first on your show.
I know. Some of this stuff I have never heard before, but yet we have all these scientists coming to Flint, and nobody is talking about the kind of stuff that I have on my list from you.
Yeah.
Tritium. I never heard of that before.
I know.
That's why I couldn't wait to get you back on, because I looked at that list, I said, what the heck is all of this? Of course it's in the water. Why wouldn't it be in the water? Now, there are some building inspectors, home inspectors that test for radon. You know, they're like, I have a guy lined up, so when I move, he come in and does the home inspection, and he tests for radon. So what you're saying is he can test for radon, and the numbers would be, is there a safe number or no safe number, or do you think whatever he tests for is not going to be right? Or because you said it's hard to test, you bring the equipment in and all this and that. What is it like, a little Geiger counter? I mean, I'm expecting to be like.
We're talking two different things here now. You're talking about radon, which is gas.
Mm-hmm.
The radon gas.
Yeah.
And typically, your house is like a slab of cement, and around it there's drainage tiles. And when the radon gas seeps its way up through the soil, it hits that concrete, goes around those tiles, they call it. It's actually a pipe, and the pipe ends up in your sump pump. So the highest point of radon is going to be in your sump pump. I actually, I still have a couple of those machines, but I had one that was really sophisticated, and I put the sensor in the sump pump one time. It was so high it blew the machine.
Oh my goodness!
In the back.
So I live on a slab. So would slab houses have radon, or is it just ones with basements?
You could have it and the neighbor not, or the neighbor have it and you not. It's really weird. And then in the wintertime when the ground freezes, radon follows what's called a chimney effect. So because the ground is froze and it's not froze under your home, it'll kind of weep around, and it'll come under your basement and then come up through your house and go up, just like the chimney effect, and it kind of pulls it up. So the way they mitigate it is they put a pipe down in below the slab, and they form a negative partial pressure down there, which is just a little tiny fan that is exhausted up through your roof, usually through a pipe, and then that'll prevent it from entering into the home. But yeah, it causes lung cancer is the problem with radon.
Yeah, just another cancer. Dang.
Yeah.
I got the TTHM cancer. I got the radon cancer. I got the tritium cancer. Let me see. Let me find something else on this list that you gave me.
Well, let me explain what this cancer is. Real simple. You've got, imagine a spring. You know, like a spring that's in your fountain pen or your ballpoint pen?
Yeah.
Okay. You take those two springs and you mesh them in together. Now that's the DNA that's inside of a cell. That defines who you are and what that cell does, if it's a liver cell or a lung cell or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that cell decides it's going to reproduce. So, now take those two springs and move them apart. So they're now apart. And they go through a mitosis thing where they actually form another helicoil. So now you take two more springs and you mesh them in, and now you got two cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each of those cells is identical to the other one, right? They're identical. So that's normal reproduction. However, well, what cancer is? Start all over again. Take those two springs and bombard it with, let's say, an atom of lead, or bombard it with a beta ray, like what comes out of a radon gas, or a gamma ray, which comes out of a tritium, and anything else that you might be in contact with. And it bombards and it hits one of those molecules that makes up that spring, and it busts off the hydrogen and puts on that particle of lead. So now you take those two springs and you move them apart. The one on the left that wasn't bombarded, it reproduces itself to a normal cell. The one on the right, when it goes through mitosis and it splits, you've got one helicoil that's normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it goes along and it's a normal cell. So you got three normal cells. However, what do we do here? We've got this helicoil that's exactly like the other one normal, except for one little atom of lead. We're just taking lead as an example.
Yeah.
And it could be aluminum or, you know, who knows what, or radiation. So now, when this thing tries to split, it forms one. There's only one atom of lead there, so it reproduces itself identically. But the coil is kinky because it can't. That area is open, right?
Right.
So it bends over, and another little hydrogen bond attaches to it, so it's got a kink in it. Well, that's not cancer yet, but it's looking pretty bad.
Mm.
Now, when that cell tries to replicate itself, usually your body attacks it. And this is where I say you've got the energy in a basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and you can fight off some of this stuff. But now you got a ping pong ball, and so this cell that's kinky tries to reproduce, and your body doesn't have the sense to go after it and kill it before it reproduces. So it reproduces. And then it continues to reproduce kinky cells, kinky DNAs.
Wow.
And that's what cancer is.
Hmm.
That's a layman's
Yeah.
explanation of cancer.
It's scary. It's one of them things you never want to be told anything about it. It's one of them words you want to erase from the vocabulary of words. But another thing on here, you had child with black line on the gum line.
Oh, yeah, these are case histories here. I don't want to get into too much of that, but yeah, sometimes I get phone calls from folks that have strange things going on. And in this family, they had a child that had, behavioral problems, school problems, and health issues. And the more the person talked, the parent talked, the more I thought, wow, I think I got a lead into this from what they've been telling me. So I asked the person, does the child have a black line along the gum line of his teeth? And they said, yeah, he does. And I said, well, that's significant lead toxicity. He's got super high elevated blood lead levels.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You can tell that from a line across the gums. It's not like the whole gums are black.
It's between the gum and the tooth. It's actually a black line right there between the gum and the tooth.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's a lot of lead.
Oh.
That's a lot of lead exposure over a long period of time.
Mm.
So if you inspect your children's teeth, if you see that, then,
wow.
better get them checked.
Mm. Well, I'm going to tell you.
Getting them checked I think we talked about this too. Getting the child checked is another sampling thing. There's a whole other thing because the lead in a child goes to the bones after 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, that's
so
what.
If you go to the doctor and they find any amount of lead in the blood, that means this child has a constant exposure to lead.
Mm.
And then as a parent, you better start looking for where it's coming from.
Because
it could be lead paint, it could be lead water.
Yeah, because otherwise you say the lead, say they drink the water and you got lead, that lead after a couple of days settles in their bones. So if they did a blood draw, it would not show up in that, or it would be a very low number.
Right, exactly.
So they really the number would be wrong because it's more in the bone, in like the bone marrow. Is that what you mean, like in the marrow?
Well, if it gets into the bone marrow, then that's another kind of a disease. But typically, it goes into the calcium.
Oh, okay.
Of the bone.
The calcium of the bone.
Stored in there. Yeah, but the bone marrow is right there, and if it gets into the bone marrow, it's just that little spring example we went through. Yeah. All of a sudden, you pick up different kind of blood diseases. Mm-hmm. Where you're not getting enough blood oxygen levels. Yeah, you might get lupus and leukemia, and those kind of things. Basically, what lupus is. That there you go. I just explained. Not that there aren't other causes, but that is one cause of lupus. Lead in the bone marrow. In the bone. Now, my niece has lupus, and she was in the Air Force, and nobody else in our family that we know of has lupus. And now I have a cousin. I just found another cousin has lupus. So do you think they were exposed to something like that years ago and didn't know it and it's just now catching up, or what would you think? She would have to write down, go through a history and at that time what she was exposed to. For instance, she's on the firing range and I want to know what kind of bullets she's using. Is she using lead bullets? And what's the ventilation like and stuff like this, and as a source of the lead. She used to do. Been exposed? Yeah, she used to do. I think it was called like munitions testing or something. But I don't know if you remember the cartoon where Bugs Bunny would hit the bomb like bing, and then he'd write "dud" on it. It was something like that. Cartoons, weren't they? Yeah. She was telling me it was something like that. Miss out today, don't they? They miss out on it. But you see Bugs Bunny, that bomb, the bullets and bombs rolling down the line, and he's got to hit it to see if it's a dud. Yeah. Well, if she was studying munitions, that's a lot of lead. Oh. Yeah. Little firing. Yeah, there's lead in there. And mercury. There's mercury in there. Yeah. Too, in the cap. Well, I worry about. Eliminated mercury. Well, when they came out with those coil light bulbs and they was telling everybody to change over to them for saving energy, and then they had to withdraw them later because they found out they had mercury dust in them, and they was like, if you drop one in the house, evacuate the house, open all the windows and all this and that. And I'm like, what?
I took every one of
Mm-hmm.
mine out. I didn't take chances. I went right back and took all mine out, and I bought up every other light bulb I could find, the regular kind, because I never liked
You know,
those
I
anyways.
took that to EPA years ago. Just what you said.
Mm.
I took that to EPA, and their response was, yes, there's a potential hazard with the mercury, but we cut the mercury out on the other end where they make the electricity, so we have to have a balance, and we think this is the better of the two evils.
Well, I wouldn't think there would be no better with mercury. I'm scared of that stuff. I mean, growing
Yeah.
up as a kid, it was mercury and everything. We even had the little liquid part, it'd be rolling around or whatever. And I don't think people really thought about it as much. It could be a lot of that stuff in our system because I'm 64 and I'm back in the era where,
Mm-hmm.
the atomic bomb and they like hide under your desk and don't look at the flash.
Yeah.
So who
I was I
knows?
was I was eating dinner last night with our 104-year-old relative, and she had this pumpkin there that had a little LED on it that flashed red, green, purple, orange, all these colors and various forms of brightness. And I looked at this little thing, and it's got just a little base with a little hearing aid battery in it, and it's got this one LED. And I'm thinking, now, how did they do that with one LED to get various wavelengths of light with different time frequencies between and which don't duplicate themselves? Well, you put a drop of mercury in there.
Oh,
I mean a tiny drop,
right.
and you know, and you get this flow pattern to that mercury, and that's what it does. It changes the wavelength of light, and it makes it flicker in different ways as that little droplet of mercury moves around the tip of the LED.
Well,
So
see,
it's everywhere.
it's
You know, I mean,
everywhere. It's like,
everywhere.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna do one more of these, and then we're gonna wrap it up. You have on here ferric chloride.
Oh, okay. Well, over in the drinking water plant, I don't know what I had in my mind mentioning that, but ferric chloride is used in treating water. Um, at the Stewart water treatment plant or the one in Appearance.
Mm-hmm.
They bring the water in, and that's one of the first things they do is they add that, and then they add polymers to it and put it in a settling tank, add some flocking agent, and flock the stuff out, the iron and the contaminants that are in the water, and then they go off and chlorinate it. All of this is through what I call a free flow open system.
Mm-hmm.
So ferric chloride is one of the chemicals. And in fact, at the Stewart water treatment plant, they probably use more tons of ferric chloride than anything else in their treatment. So imagine where ferric chloride comes from. Well, you got a pickling mill, and it's pickling steel. And these tanks are huge. I mean, they're football size, you know.
Wow.
And they're pickling these rolls, huge rolls of steel that weigh tons in a roll. Some of it's in rods, some of it's in barrels, and they pickle this stuff in hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid, and they get a lot of iron in the pickle, right?
Mm.
And when the iron gets up so high, it won't pickle anymore. So they haul it away to a recovery plant, and in that recovery plant, they add chlorine gas to it and form ferric chloride. And then that's sold to the water treatment plant as a water purification chemical.
Oh.
Now, how pure is it?
Well, are we?
What did they pickle?
Yeah, I mean, if all that stuff is going in there to be pickled, and they're gonna send it to fix the water, seem like they're adding stuff that shouldn't be in there. I don't want to be pickled.
Possibly.
I'm in a pickle, but not necessarily wanting to be a pickle. When you said pickling, I thought of Vlasic plant first. I was like, what the hell? I'll never eat another pickle. That's too much.
Yeah, that's acetic acid they use, like vinegar.
Yeah, like vinegar. But you said a pickle. Dear. I'm like, oh my God. See, that's why it's good to talk to a chemist, because I'm learning a lot from this stuff. And this kind of stuff, normally it's like reading the when you're looking to see what the ingredients are in something and you can't pronounce the words. I'm like, what is that? What is that? Yeah. And it's like, if you can't pronounce the word, it shouldn't be good.
Yeah,
that's the way I say it.
So it's like I hope the mayor's listening.
Probably not.
I'd like her to. Yeah, probably not. But here's the challenge. Over at the wastewater treatment plant, they use ferric chloride too.
Mm-hmm.
For the kind of the same reason. They add it, and then they can actually precipitate the iron out as ferrous hydroxide, and it forms a snowflake, and it flows down, and it catches a lot of stuff in the waste and into the sludge. So, in the first question would be, how many times has the water plant borrowed ferric chloride from the waste plant, thinking that it was drinking water quality ferric chloride?
Oh.
The second point is, on the purchase order for ferric chloride for the water treatment plant, do we specify the contaminant level allowed? And do we send samples out under statistical process control for raw material acquisition to independent labs to have those contaminants checked?
Wow.
And those records should be made public. Not available, then we got a problem. And the who knows what's been going on? Who knows what we've been getting?
Yeah, well, that's what I say. It's evident now. We don't know what we've been getting.
Corporations, when they have get ISO approved, they have to have all these records of the hydrochloric acid they bought or the pickle that they bought. They have to have all of that down, you know. So how is it that the government possibly, I'm not saying it's for sure, but how come we don't have, in other words, did they do this? Are they statistically process controlling their raw materials? And why wouldn't they apply for ISO approval if they were to get ISO approval? Those organizations are out there to teach those water plant operators about statistical process control. And the first thing you do is your instruments, and then the next thing you do is your raw materials coming in, and then you check every batch, and you keep retainers. And corporations have to do this all the time, every day, every process.
Well, the problem
not being done over at the water treatment plant.
Yeah, well, the problem with
I hope the mayor's listening to this.
Yeah, well, the problem with what I see is everybody in her administration have no experience in none of these things. She has no experience being a mayor. They had the girl at the water plant that had no experience. And it's like, how do you keep hiring people with no experience for these kinds of jobs? And then they end up dropping like flies because it's like, it's too much. I don't know what I'm doing. And now you're going to poison the city. So, and they're gone. They left us now. I mean, how do you get away with just keep hiring the same types of people? Is this a friendship thing, or they say they're not qualified to do the job, but yet they get hired? I should just go on down there and get a damn job. What the hell? I mean, come on, I'm not qualified for it, but I'm as qualified as those people, I guess. I mean, if I can get a big salary, you know, what the heck? I can go down. I can write something down.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, you just have to have the. So I guess what we do is get a hold of their QC manual and see if these items are in their QC manual and see if they've actually been doing it.
That stands for quality control.
You know, yeah, the response would be, well, the EPA hasn't demanded that we do that. I guess that's the whole point of this, is that corporations have to do it.
Yeah.
But you go over in the government sector, and somehow they skirt it. They don't have to get ISO approval or go through all these hoops, you know. And
yeah.
Consequently, we ended up in the problem in Flint.
And
it's just a duplication. It's just a duplication of. Here's what we talked about. We talked about the anaerobic bacteria in the pipe coming in from the KWA. We talked about no pro forma study to even, to determine, what the treatment plant should be looking like.
Right.
And they built a system that's the same protocol as the Flint Stewart water treatment plant is. Oh, granted, it's nice new shiny equipment, and it's better and everything, but it's a flow-through system.
So
and
it's the same
that
as...
didn't work.
Yeah.
That didn't work,
It's the same
so
as what we already have. Yeah, they're building another plant just like the one we have. The only difference is it's brand new.
Yeah, and the Detroit system, the treatment plant is right at the source. That's what you want to do all over the United States. You don't put your treatment plant up next to the community. You put it where the water is coming in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Things change in the pipe. Yeah.
Yeah. Even to me, that makes sense.
I could get so upset, I'll tell you. I just jump out of my skin at this stuff.
Hey, XK Bob, this is John. I was wondering, do you have a book or something out there that you know that might be available to people for about basic water chemistry that people can get, maybe understand, layperson's guide that they could access maybe somewhere? And what would you recommend if there's anything you would recommend?
Well, I would recommend that people want to pursue getting a water treatment license, either industrial or municipal, to get back in touch with me, because we'd like to have a list of these people that want to get those jobs from the inner city and get them trained to get their D license. The D license is a good paying job. It's a living wage job. Any city around the entire nation, municipality, township, I don't care what city you go to, they all need operators. There's not enough operators around this country. So these jobs are available. We can get them through their Class D license and place them in jobs, San Diego, Atlanta, Tupelo, Mississippi, wherever, or Flint. Flint needs 12 of them, and they had to hire. They had to have their committee hire a committee to try to find these people. That's how bad it is. So if there's people out there that want to pursue this, I'd very much like them to get a hold of myself or Matt Taylor and get on the list. And then we're looking to maybe train some people and seed that as a community effort and create jobs, get them trained for jobs, and then get them working. So
do you think you could put something like that on Facebook, like a shorter version of what you just said about, people getting the license and everything, and you guys need help, and have us share it around and see what kind of response you get?
You want me to put it on my Facebook page?
Yeah. Or
all points.
You can put it anywhere, and just so we can share it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know about the job availability. I don't know what a D class is. Maybe people that know what it is and looking for something like that. So if you put something up,
you're starting out at the base level.
Mm-hmm.
You work in a plant for 1 year, 2,000 hours, and then you take the next license exam. You take the next exam,
mm-hmm.
and then you move up the ladder.
Yeah.
Until you've worked for 5 years. And then you can take over it's an F class, which is like an A class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the job that the gal had here in Flint. Her salary was, I think, $143,000 a year.
Yeah. So
these are good jobs.
Yeah. So like, say some of the people that are doing those with the core program that's handling water had to go through training. Maybe that's something they want to continue, or maybe somebody want to just do something different altogether, but they don't know about it. And you have a plant, you have the ability, and you need people. So maybe if you just post something like that so that we can share it around, like my page, John's page, little stuff like that, so we can get it, because everybody's on social media. And if they can, see it, you might get some kind of feedback, and maybe you can get some people like to get started on a program like that.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you do that. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come back on and talk to me again, because I'm telling you, every time I talk to you, I think I'm smart again. I'll be telling people stuff, and they looking at me like I'm crazy. They act like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm like, yeah, I know. I talked to Bob, the wastewater man. But anyways, thank you, Bob, so much for taking the time. And I'm not gonna hold you up any longer. And post that up there when you get a chance, and we'll make sure that for me and John, we'll pass it around. He can put it in other sites that he know of, and this and that. And maybe we can get some kind of feedback for you.
Okay, super, good deal.
All right.
Thanks so much, and thank you, people. Okay.
Okay. See you later, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Bye. Well, another fun day at the Flaminpit Show. I hope everybody watched or listened. They were able to pick up some good tips. So it's going to be Flaminpit, and we're going to be out.